This is a demo of the pipeline aggregation feature in UrbanCode Velocity. In this instance, I'm using a pipeline titled JKE pipeline. I can see I have mapped 3 applications in here. This particular setup might be used by a team that manages several applications and likes to deploy them to their QA or their production environments at the same time as part of a more templatized deployment actual plan. The dev, QA, and production environments at the top are actually logical stages, meaning I can add multiple physical environments to each of these. For instance, on my JKE banking app, which is coming from UrbanCode Deploy, I have mapped a QA1 and a QA2 environment to this QA stage. To add a new application to this pipeline, I can just hit Add App, select either UrbanCode Deploy or Jenkins, and then name my application from Jenkins. In this case, I have a JKE service that I'm going to add. Now you're given these plus sign options. This is how we're actually going to map the jobs from Jenkins into this pipeline. So the input will be the initial build. So I have this JKE service job, which is coming from Jenkins here, that I'm going to map to that build. And if I go over and look at Jenkins, I can actually see these 3 jobs. I've just created them and never ran them, but you can see that they're listed here. For my dev environment, I'm actually going to deploy to dev as part of this same job, so I can link the same one as I did for the input. That way, when the build happens, it'll also deploy to dev, and UrbanCode Velocity will know about it. Now for QA and prod, I actually created separate jobs here, or Jenkins pipelines, and this is how I can manage the deployment to higher environments in a broken up, more manageable way through UrbanCode Velocity. So I select my QA one. Now I'm going to select my prod one, and I'm ready to go. Now if I go back over to Jenkins, I can click on my JKE service job and hit build. Build number 1 is now happening. And now if I go back to UrbanCode Velocity, I can actually see build 1 was picked up immediately and it's listed in my pipeline. Now to deploy to QA, I'm actually going to pass this build and its various properties to my next job in Jenkins. And this is going to apply for all of the apps. So if I click on here and I say View Deployment Template for QA, it's actually just a series of deployment tasks for deploying each of these applications to QA. And now this is the template, so I'm going to go back to my pipeline and hit play. And now what this is going to do is give me all of the latest options which are deployed to the previous environment, meaning dev. It's going to automatically map which environment is previous, so it will know what the latest versions are that were deployed there. So you can see these are listed here. I'm going to go ahead and say deploy. And if I click on deploying from plan, I can see that all of these applications are actually deploying at once. So here's my JKE banking deploying to both my QA1 and my QA2 environments in UrbanCode Deploy. If I click this link, it'll actually take me to the UrbanCode Deploy deployment process, and I can see that running with its various steps. Similarly, if I look at the Jenkins jobs, which I've already completed because they're very short, I get the list of steps. I can see how many have completed, how many failed, if I've broken this up into pipeline steps, for instance. And if I click this link, it'll actually take me to the job for my JKE Mortgage QA, which is linked to my JKE Mortgage QA application here. So now that I can see all of these were successfully deployed to QA, I can go back to my pipeline, and I should see all of the latest versions are now running in QA, which matches up with which versions were running in dev. Now finally, now that I've deployed all these to my dev and my QA environments, it's time to go to production. Now I could go to production in the same way that I went to QA by clicking deploy, or I can actually say join release, which will allow me to join maybe a larger enterprise release, which there will be another documentation video surrounding how to do that. But in this case, I'm just going to deploy directly to production. Now before I do that, let's take a look at the production template. In here, I actually have linked ServiceNow steps where I'm going to move a ticket through as I deploy to these. So it's very similar to the QA environment, except that there's a little bit more manageability if I wanted to create notification tasks or various approvals or manual steps to do things like checking to make sure environments are up and running and okay. I can add those in here. Going back to my pipeline view, I'm going to go ahead and run this. And now, again, the versions that are going to be listed here as options are going to be what versions are actually have been deployed to QA already. So it's going to grab the latest by default, which are actually the ones that I just deployed to QA. Okay, and now jumping ahead just a little bit, once the deployment to production succeeds, I can see that my full version inventory has been updated. Everything that was most recently built is actually all the way deployed into production with these nice green arrows next to it, including my new JKE service application.